Alright folks, buckle up because we're about to dive into the most Ontario thing that's ever happened. Doug Ford channeling his inner Donald Trump, and yes, it's exactly as chaotic as it sounds. The Toronto Sun's Brian Lilley just dropped a spicy column suggesting that Ontario is open for business, but only if you don't tick off the Premier. That's right, Ford's apparently running the province like it's his personal fiefdom, and if you get on his bad side, good luck getting anything approved. Welcome back to Canadian Insights, where today we're unpacking whether Doug Ford has gone full Trump mode, what that means for Ontario's business climate, and why this whole situation feels like watching someone play SimCity after one too many Crown Royals. Let's get into it. So Brian Lilley, who's been covering Ontario politics longer than most of us have been paying attention, comes out with this piece basically saying Ontario's business-friendly reputation comes with a massive asterisk. That asterisk reads, "Don't annoy Doug Ford." Now, at first glance, you might think, well, every politician has favorites and people they don't like. That's politics. But what Lilley's suggesting goes deeper than that. We're talking about a premier who allegedly makes business decisions based on personal grievances rather than economic merit, and if that doesn't set off alarm bells, you haven't been paying attention to how economies are supposed to work. The Trump comparison is deliberate and it's loaded. Love him or hate him, Trump's presidency was defined by unpredictability, personal loyalty tests, and decision-making that seemed to come straight from the gut rather than briefing books. Policy by personality. Governance by grudge. And according to Lilley, that's increasingly what we're seeing from Ford. Ontario's open for business has always been Ford's signature slogan, his economic brand, the thing he campaigned on and repeated ad nauseam. But if business access depends on whether you're in Ford's good graces, that's not really open for business, is it? That's selective for business. That's conditional for business. That's nepotism with better branding. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, because this isn't just theoretical political commentary. There have been whispers, reports, and now increasingly public observations about how decisions get made in Ford's Ontario. Companies that play nice, that donate to the right causes, that avoid criticizing the government too loudly, they seem to get favorable treatment. Permits move faster. Approvals come easier. Doors open. But companies or individuals who speak out, who challenge Ford's policies, who donate to the wrong political parties. Suddenly everything's complicated. Suddenly there are delays. Suddenly the red tape that Ford promised to cut is wrapped around your project like a Christmas present nobody wants. This is textbook Trump-style governance. Remember how Trump would publicly attack companies that criticized him? Remember how he'd threaten to pull government contracts or create regulatory headaches for businesses whose CEOs said something he didn't like? That's not how democratic governance is supposed to work. Leaders are supposed to serve all constituents, all businesses, all citizens, regardless of personal feelings. The moment governance becomes transactional based on loyalty rather than merit, you've crossed the line from democracy into something much more troubling. Now, Ford's defenders will say this is overblown. They'll point to Ontario's economic growth, the investments that have come into the province, the jobs created, and say, see, it's working. And sure, Ontario's economy has had bright spots. But here's the thing, economic success doesn't excuse authoritarian tendencies. You can have a growing economy and still have concerning governance practices. China's economy boomed for decades while being fundamentally undemocratic. Economic growth alone isn't a measure of good governance. How you achieve that growth matters just as much. The comparison to Trump isn't just about personality or style, though Ford certainly shares Trump's populist flair, the common man branding, the us versus them rhetoric. It's about the fundamental approach to power. Trump viewed the presidency as an extension of his business empire, where loyalty was currency and everything was negotiable based on personal relationships. Ford seems to be running Ontario with a similar playbook. The Premier's office becomes the center of all decision-making, circumventing normal processes, and relationships with Ford personally determine outcomes more than policy frameworks or objective criteria. Let's be real about what this means for Ontario businesses. If you're a company trying to make investment decisions, stability and predictability matter enormously. You need to know that the rules apply equally, that your approvals depend on meeting regulatory requirements rather than whether the Premier likes you. When governance becomes personalized, when it's about who you know rather than what you're proposing, that creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is poison for investment decisions. Companies need to know they're operating in a system where merit matters, where following the rules gets results, where political connections aren't prerequisites for success. This isn't just bad for business, it's bad for democracy. When government favors are dispensed based on loyalty, You create an incentive structure that rewards sycophancy over honest engagement. Companies learn to keep quiet about problems, to avoid criticizing even bad policies, because speaking up might cost them access. That's a chilling effect on democratic discourse, and it's exactly what we've seen in jurisdictions where personalized governance takes hold. Brian Lilley calling this out is significant because he's not exactly a left-wing Ford critic. The Sun has traditionally been friendly territory for conservative politicians. When you're getting this kind of commentary from columnists who should be in your corner, that's a sign the problem is real and noticeable enough that even allies are concerned. The Crown Royal reference in the title is perfect, by the way. Crown Royal, that quintessentially Canadian whiskey that's smooth until suddenly it's not, and you wake up wondering what happened and why you thought karaoke was a good idea. That's kind of where Ontario is with Ford right now. Things seemed okay, the economy's chugging along, and then suddenly you realize decisions are being made that don't quite add up, and the common thread is personal loyalty to the Premier rather than sound policy. Here's where this gets particularly dangerous: precedent. When one leader governs this way and faces no real consequences, it normalizes the behavior. Future leaders, whether conservative, liberal, or otherwise, look at what Ford did and think, well, if he could get away with it, why can't I? Democratic norms erode not through single dramatic moments but through gradual acceptance of things that should be unacceptable. Trump did this in the US, pushing boundaries constantly until things that would have been scandals under previous administrations barely registered. Ford risks doing the same thing in Ontario. And let's talk about the opposition for a second, because where are they in all this? If Ford's really governing like a petty autocrat, why isn't this a bigger political issue? Part of it is that Ontario's opposition is fragmented and hasn't found effective ways to make these concerns resonate with voters. Part of it is that Ford's populist brand is genuinely popular with a significant chunk of the electorate who see him as a fighter against elites and bureaucracy. And part of it is that many voters just don't follow political process stories closely enough to care about how decisions get made as long as outcomes seem okay. But outcomes aren't okay if they're achieved through undemocratic means. That's the fundamental problem with defending Ford's approach by pointing to economic stats. If those stats came at the cost of fair governance, transparent decision-making, and equal treatment under the law, then they're not actually successes. They are symptoms of a system being warped to serve political interests rather than public good. The business community should be particularly concerned about this because today you might be in Ford's good graces, but what about tomorrow? What happens when you make a decision he doesn't like, when your company's interests don't align with his political priorities, when you say something publicly that rubs him the wrong way? Suddenly that open for business Ontario isn't so open anymore. That's not a stable environment for long-term investment. That's a risk factor that sophisticated investors absolutely consider when deciding where to put their money. There's also an international reputation angle here. Ontario likes to present itself as a transparent, rule-of-law jurisdiction that's attractive for global investment. That reputation matters enormously for attracting foreign capital and talent. When stories circulate about governance being personalized, about decisions depending on relationships with the Premier rather than objective criteria, that tarnishes Ontario's brand. Companies and investors who are choosing between Ontario and other jurisdictions start looking elsewhere if they think the game is rigged based on political connections. Ford's Trump-like tendencies extend beyond just business favoritism. There's the combative relationship with media, the attacks on critics, the bypassing of traditional accountability mechanisms, the tight control over information flow, the loyalty demands from caucus members, the list goes on. Each individual instance might seem minor, but the pattern is what matters. It's a pattern that mirrors Trump's approach to executive power, and it's concerning precisely because we've seen where that leads. Here's the thing that makes this particularly frustrating. Ford didn't have to govern this way. He won a solid majority. He has public support. He could have advanced his agenda through normal democratic processes, built genuine consensus, created policy frameworks that applied equally to everyone. Instead, we're apparently getting governance by personal whim, where your success depends on staying on the Premier's good side. That's a choice, not a necessity, and it's a bad choice that diminishes Ontario's democratic institutions. The question now is what happens next. Does this become normalized? Do voters and stakeholders just accept that this is how Ontario works now? Or is there pushback, either from within the PC party, from the opposition, from the business community, or from voters? Because left unchecked, this approach to governance only gets worse. Power that's unaccountable tends to become more arbitrary over time, not less. Brian Lilley's column is a warning shot, and people should pay attention. When conservative commentators are raising concerns about a conservative Premier's approach to power, that's significant. It means the issues transcend partisan politics and get at fundamental questions about how government should function in a democracy. Ontario deserves better than governance by grudge. Businesses deserve better than having to curry favor with the Premier to get fair treatment. Citizens deserve better than a system where personal loyalty matters more than merit. Whether Ford recognizes these concerns and adjusts, or whether he doubles down on the Trump playbook, will tell us a lot about where Ontario's headed. If this deep dive got you thinking, hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell because Canadian Insights is bringing you multiple videos every single day breaking down the political chaos across this country. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Ford's crossed the line into Trump territory, or is this just politics as usual? And hey, if you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in understanding what's really happening in Canadian politics, so share this with someone who needs to see it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video where we keep peeling back the layers on the stories that matter. Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, democracy only works when we pay attention.